Hey, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Getting Down to Business with Scott D. Perron. And I am really excited today. I have two phenomenal guests that are great leaders in the floor covering industry, which, as you guys know, is where I've hung my hat over the last 30 plus years. And I'd like to first introduce a good friend, I hope he will say back to me, the leader and executive chair for the Floor Covering Education Foundation, but more importantly, he's the CEO of the World Floor Covering Association, and that's Mr. Scott Humphrey. Scott, thanks for being with us today.
Good to be with you, Scott. Excited about this time together, especially with my buddy Jim Aaron on here with us. It's going to be a good time.
Yeah, and it's been a while since you and I have spoke live, but we've been interacting together over the last many years in the industry, and I have to say I'm very appreciative of all the effort you've put in to the Wfca and other things in the industry.
Thank you, my friend. I'm glad you give us a voice. You help greatly.
Yeah, one thing I can do is run my mouth, so that's what I'm doing here. And with that, I want to introduce another friend who actually had my audio podcast not too long ago. He is the executive director for the Floor Covering Education Foundation, and that's Mr. Jim Aaron. Jim, thanks for being with me again.
Scott, it's a pleasure. Thank you for having me again. I'm looking forward to the conversation. Thank you.
So as you guys know, the catalyst of this podcast has been for me to kind of pay it forward, help other industry leaders and business owners of all different types to forward their careers, to forward their businesses, whether it's startup, it's consulting through the processes, or it's getting it ready for sale. But as I said, my industry background has always been in floor covering. And one of the things I want to do a really good job of giving back to is the floor covering industry. And we've got a lot of issues that we would love to have solved, and I wanted to discuss some of those with you today and also talk about the opportunities. Scotty, give us a little background on you and how you ended up in this seat that you're in today.
Yeah, so I can take you way back. My dad owned a carpet mill. When I was 7 years old, I began working in a carpet mill. My dad had been with Corps of Engineers, took all of his money out of retirement. At that time, there were more millionaires per capita in Dalton, Georgia than anywhere in the world because carpet was exploding, and he wanted to be one. Unfortunately, he got in when everybody else was getting out. We never really made any money, and he eventually went back with the Corps of Engineers, but I stayed with the industry. I would come back and work with my uncle every summer, and then after graduating from college, spending a couple of years in a ministry position, realized I wasn't called to do that, and what I knew the most about was the flooring industry. And so I found the biggest building in Dalton, Georgia, which was Shaw Industries up on the hill. I sought them out, got an interview, and started as a sales rep in 1988 with Shaw. Spent 25 years there, and for the last 11 years, just a little over 11 years, I've been the CEO of the World Floor Covering Association.
Well, that's fantastic. And Mr. Aaron, would you do the same? Tell us how you got in this bag.
Oh, wow. My uncle owned a flooring store in West Columbia, South Carolina, and at the time I was working my way through college cutting meat at Winn-Dixie. And he said, don't you want to stop doing that and come to work for me at a flooring store? So it sounded a lot better than cutting meat. And so the rest is history. I went to work for a flooring distributor after I left him. And look, I worked for William & Burden Company for 12 years and then Mohawk Industries. And prior to executive director of the Floor Covering Education Foundation, I spent 17 years at CCA. The last 12 or 13 of which I was VP of merchandising for the Carpet One division.
So fantastic. And as you know, for those who know me, they know what I've been doing, but basically I grew up on a roll of carpet, a lot like you guys have been in a really long time. This industry is like the mafia. Once you get in, you cannot get out. And,
So true.
But I think the real process is that it takes several years to learn it because of the type of industry, the type of application of the products, the mistakes you might make early on in the industry. And I think at the end of the day, Scott, you might agree with me. If you survive all that, you've learned enough now to go out and be effective and make a good living.
Yeah, I agree. And I think ultimately, and the reason you've been successful too, Scott, it ultimately comes down to relationships, as it does, I think, through all of your life. If you meet the right people, you treat people right, people, especially when business gets tough, they do business with people they want to do business with. And so the relationship really, really matters.
Jim, would you do me a favor and kind of give us the catalyst for the Floor Covering Education Foundation? How did that all come about?
Yeah. Well, listen, I think anyone who's been in the flooring industry for any length of time, you've heard people talk about, wow, there's just not enough installers. I'm having trouble finding installers. If I had more installers, my business could grow. Well, we've heard that those sentiments, those comments grow louder and louder and louder. And I think, and Scott can speak to this, but I think it was back in 2019 when the World Floor Covering Association and others from the Floor Covering Leadership Council commissioned the Blackstone Group to study the issue. It was like, listen, yeah, we talked about it subjectively, but let's be objective about it. Let's quantify the issue if we're going to tackle it. So they commissioned the Blackstone Group to study it. And after a study, they came back and said, look, the industry does have a problem. You are losing installers at a rapid rate. Number one, one of your biggest issues is, like a lot of other trades, you have an aging workforce. Your average age of the installer in the flooring industry is 56 years old. And to keep in mind, this was in 2019. It also said that the industry is losing between 4,000 and 6,000 installers every year, and that would accelerate. And I think that was the third most important thing that they said, that would accelerate and continue if the industry didn't come together and do something about it. So that doing something about it was the World Floor Covering Association said, listen, we're going to prop this foundation up. We're going to be the first one to say, we're going to commit, we're going to donate the first $1 million and prop up the Floor Covering Education Foundation. And a group of board of directors, retailers, the retailers that were on the Wfca board of directors, reached out to a number of other manufacturers in Dalton area and got their commitments to support the foundation as well. I think, again, that was in 2020 or 2019. Of course, 2020, we all know what happened. COVID happened, and I think everything was put on hold for a little while. And I came on board in early 2021. So we're coming up almost on 4 years when I came on board as executive director of the Floor Covering Education Foundation.
And Scotty, maybe let's touch a little bit on the World Floor Covering Association and talk about their genesis and how they've come so far and where they are now.
Yeah, the World Floor Covering Association, WFCA, has been around since 1970 plus years. We were actually a combination of two different associations. You had the Western Floor Covering Association, and you had the American Floor Covering Association out of Chicago, Western out of Southern California. And the Western had started this little show in Las Vegas so that the industry would have a show to go to, and that became Surfaces. We combined both those associations. We wanted to keep it WFCA for Western Floor Covering Association, so we changed the W to World, and we actually began to reach out worldwide. We have members now from China, from Europe, from South Africa, all over the world. But the majority, 95% of our membership, is in the United States. Our focus is primarily independent flooring retailers, people that rely on this industry for their livelihood. But we have members that are manufacturers, distributors, suppliers, and then seeing the issue that Jim was just talking about with installation, and quite frankly, just getting fed up with the fact that our industry is really good at talking about stuff and not really good at fixing it. I said, somebody's got to own this, because if nobody owns it, it's never going to get fixed. And the way I saw it, Scott, there's a challenge that if we don't fix the issue of installation, ultimately you might not need retailers, because that will cause the manufacturer to have to create product that does not need professional installation. And I don't think that's good for anyone. And so we took it on, and we took it on first by acquiring the key assets of CFI, bringing them in-house, and really focusing our money and attention on training as many people as we possibly could. But we wanted a partnership that allowed us to function with all the other trade associations as well, especially those that were training in introductory product categories like wood, like tile. And so, as Jim laid out so well, we had a meeting of the minds at one of our executive committee meetings with the WFCA. And I think it was Don Roberts probably that threw out the idea, why don't we put $1 million out there and see if we can get others to match it? And we did. We were blessed enough to sit down with Shaw Industries, who immediately matched. And then we met with Engineered Floors and Mohawk and others who have all donated some degree of money to this, and really gave us the credibility so that Jim could have conversations with others and say, okay, now what part are you going to do? Because installation is an everybody in the industry problem. And in order for it to be solved, it must be an everybody in the industry solution. And what we're challenged with right now is this is an industry that loves to point fingers at other people to fix the problem that we all feel. And so we really need to find ways to get people to step up and not just talk about the problem, but to be a part of the solution.
And just for clarification, who is the CFI and what do they do for the industry? Because some folks watching this won't know what it is, but most do.
Thank you, Scott. You're right. I forgot that this is not just for the flooring industry. CFI, Certified Flooring Installers, they have certified more installing professionals than anyone else in the world. Probably 40,000 plus people since their start some 26, 27 years ago. And that's what we continue to do today. They certify in all different product categories, or they partner with other entities that do. And we just want to do our part. So there's two challenges, Scott, that have plagued the industry for the last 50 years. One is not enough installers. The other is the quality of installation when we do have installers. Because our industry never had an avenue for people to get a good education in this trade. If you came into flooring installation, you came in because your brother, your uncle, your cousin, or someone else was already doing it. And they trained you, but they trained you on their limited knowledge. And so you come in knowing what you know. Well, as things changed, as manufacturers embraced technology, as new tools were used to reduce product, the old ways of installing weren't adequate anymore. And yet the majority of people out there installing were still using the old way. And so FCEF really has a twofold purpose. One is we've got to meet the needs of getting people into the trade, which Jim spends an extraordinary amount of time doing. And then over time, our goal was always that we would flip that. Maybe 80% would be people coming in at the beginning and 20% people improving their skill set. And then once we reach that plateau that the Blackstone Group said we needed to hit every year, then we would hope that 80% of it would just be helping people continue to be good and to improve their skill set. And maybe only 20% of our time would have to be getting new people into the trade.
So, Jim, it kind of begs the question. I think the common sense response from most people would be, well, how come the manufacturers and the distributors haven't taken a much harder line at getting this problem solved?
You know, it's a great question. It's something that we ask ourselves. It's something that we ask them. I think if you look at our P&L, our donation receipts, quite frankly, the overwhelming majority of the funds that have been donated to the FCEF in the last 3.5 to 4 years have come from the manufacturing side of things. That said, it's going to take everyone. I would tell you, one of the things that were said when I first came on board, and I think it was maybe Don Roberts saying, we've mentioned his name a couple of times. I'm sure we'll mention it a couple more. He was, I guess, one of the founders of the foundation. One of his phrases is industry problem, industry solutions, right? If you're a part of the industry, you should be a part of the solution. You should be a part of pulling in the direction to solving this, whether you're a retailer, a manufacturer, a distributor, regardless of what role you play, this affects all of us. So everybody should be playing a part, and no part's too small, right? It's going to take a lot of work and, quite frankly, a lot of money to make this happen. One of the things I find interesting as I've been working on this is to look at other industries and see what they are already doing, what they have been doing for years, and in some cases decades, to invest in the recruitment and training of the next generation of labor. And it goes beyond just construction-related trades. So many other industries do this. But look, I think when it comes right down to it, we can say that a typical person who might choose to become a flooring installer might also look at another construction-related trade. So you could say those construction-related trades are our competition for that type of talent. And trust me, they're way ahead of us. And those industries have already cracked the nut, so to speak, about how to get everyone in the industry donating and pulling in the same direction. This is new to our industry. I get it. But we've got to figure out how to pull in the same direction really quickly.
Any follow-up comments to that, Scott?
Yeah, and a lot of these other trades, it's actually industry mandated. the industry comes together as a whole and they solve the problem. And Jim, let me please do you a favor, because Jim has to ask for money all the time. That's not the purpose of what we're doing here, but I do want you to understand, Scott, other trades don't have finance as a barrier to entering the trade, because people know that that education is going to be free. And then after the education takes place, they're going to have guaranteed job placement. Neither one of those things were in place for us when we started. And so Jim had to spend the first 2 years, literally just helping people understand that the trade existed. The belief out there was that when people built your house, they just put a floor in with it.
Right.
That the same people that built it put the floor in. The way I've always viewed it, to me, an installer they're an artisan, right? It's like your house is a canvas and they paint the floor. And that makes the house. But we've done a horrible job in this industry of elevating that trade and telling that story. We've let people think everything else in the house matters and flooring just happens.
Well, you know what's interesting about that? And it's interesting you said that in that way, because I have the same explanation right now. I just worked with the local technical college, and as I told Jim Aaron, I'm working towards getting them to accept a meeting to go through the curriculum. And I was actually waiting for us to film this, because after we did the audio where Jim and Jim Armstrong joined us, we discussed the same parameters of this, although you weren't available for us that time, Scott. I'm glad we had a lot of people. I had several just reach out to me and say, hey, you guys should have filmed that. That would have been much better as a video. And I said, well, I'd love to get Scott Humphrey involved, because I think that's a completely different angle of attack. And I think Jim Aaron would be willing to do that. And one thing I could tell you is that when I contacted the technical schools in this area, and I was explaining to the administrative assistant or whoever the director was for the curriculums that they're putting on board, none of them knew that this was a trade. I literally was explaining it to them, and they're like, floor covering? And I'm like, yeah, we have to put floor covering in the house, just like the electrical work, the plumbing, the HVAC, all of that gets done, and we're leaving this out. We have a new curriculum for it that's been developed, and I think it's something that your team's going to want to look at. And it took me a little bit, but I think we're going to get those meetings. I think we're going to get the breakthrough, and this is certainly going to help, because with some reels and some other things we can do to tease their interest in it, and to have a city commissioner in this market who's a friend, who's about to get reelected again, hopefully. I'm sure he will, because he's done a great job, and he will help to forward these introductions, which is going to get us in the door. Once that happens, and to Jim's point, the local effect is better than you guys reaching out from on high, so to speak, because I don't know you folks.
Yes.
But if you come in as a local business person, I think we're going to get a leg up. And Jim Aaron, one of your points was we're not finding new installers, we're creating new ones by recruiting new talent into the labor pipeline.
Yeah. No doubt. It's so funny when I go to trade shows and, listen, we've been doing this a while, but not everybody still understands who we are and what we do. So when I have a booth or whatever, and I'm at a trade show, whether it's a buying group or whatever it is, I have people walk up and they see who we are. And inevitably, I'll have somebody say, well, hey, I need you to help me find a new installer. And I will say, your question is wrong. The way you're approaching this is wrong. Finding an installer is not the answer, because it's a limited amount, guys. Don't you understand? The pool is shrinking, the pie is getting smaller, and all you're talking about is moving them around from here to there to there. That's not the answer. The answer is to create the new installer. The answer is to recruit new people in. That's what has to happen. And look, there's a lot of things we can do, we will do, and we are doing on a national level at the FCEF. Even with a very small, very lean team. And we're here to assist people on the local level. And we've got a list of best practices that we've developed and we've researched and learned, and we can help those people on the local level. But at the end of the day, the magic happens locally. It has to happen locally. Recruiting has to happen locally, and training has to happen locally. That's part of the magic component here. And one of the things I often said is, it's the people, it's the retailers, it's the dealers, it's the contractors, it's those individuals that have a vested interest in this, that say, you know what, I'm actually going to invest time in this in doing something about it now that are going to be the winners in the future. You can't stick your head in the sand and think this thing is going to just figure itself out, because it's not. The people that are doing something about it now are going to be the ones that are going to be here and winning in 5 and 7 and 10 years from now.
Well, Jim, to your credit, you really caught my attention at FloorCon when it was held in Sarasota. We've been conversing ever since, and as a result, I've committed to you, to the FCEF, and hopefully to Scotty at the WFCA as well, to help forward it the best I can in my own market. And here's what's interesting. I was recently on a vendor trip. We were in Europe a couple weeks back, and I spent some time with Paul Johnson from Johnson's Floor and Home, who recently sold his business. Rick Ogle from Brewers. And although these guys are technically competitors of mine, they really aren't. I look at the mom and pops and the locally owned or the regionally owned flooring companies as compadres, if you will, because there's plenty of business for all of us. But I'm concerned about the lack of qualified installation teams that the big boxes have. And in some cases, the largest of the big boxes doesn't even provide the labor. So it really falls on us as the local teams to do a great job servicing people, because now the separation of dealers to big boxes and the quality of service is kind of getting diluted. I think the client wants the greatest installation they can get, but they really don't know how to discern how to select that. And Scotty, with that, I know you deal with a lot of the leadership across the industry. You have a tremendous board of directors. You mentioned Don Roberts. I have the ultimate respect for those guys, and for Aaron Perron and for Kenny Weisbacher and all the guys that when I was growing into the industry were really good mentors. And it's funny, I'm sitting here 20 plus years later now trying to do the same thing, although I haven't necessarily achieved the same level of success in terms of 30 locations or 40 locations. But I think the idea is the same, and maybe you could shed a little light on what you're seeing when you're dealing with the leadership of these companies.
Yeah, I think it's influence. And I love what Jim just said about the fact that, some of these people that are pouring themselves into this right now may not see a direct benefit. Not today. They may not even have a need, but they're spending their time, they're making the phone calls because they understand it's more about the industry than it is about them. Dean Howell, who was our chairman prior to Sam O'Krent, who's the chair now, used to say, a rising tide raises all ships. I know that's not his mantra, not something he created, but it is something our industry needs to adopt, because we find a lot of people that are willing to pitch in and do things when they're feeling the pain, but when they don't feel the pain, they want somebody else to fix it. And they don't understand, if the industry goes away, it hurts us all, whether you're feeling the pain now or not. We've had a discussion recently with our board on FCEF about, is this a crisis? We used to call it a crisis. Maybe it's not. But, the way I look at it, we just had 2 hurricanes that hit Florida, right? You know that. You felt it as much as anybody. CFI convention was actually right between those 2 hurricanes. Now, Scott, if I ask you, was it a crisis after it hit, or was it a crisis when you knew it was coming? So you don't wait till after it hits to get in a car and go away.
That's right.
You start when you know it's going to hit you.
Yes.
And so the reality is we have to prep now. Even if things have slowed down and we don't have nearly the burden we once did, it's going to be worse when things open back up, because we haven't fixed it when things were slow enough that we could. And so here's my, in a nutshell, Scott, my answer to that question. Everyone wants to be a leader. Very few people want to become one. Everybody wants the title. They want to simply say, yeah, I'm a leader because I've got a corner office or my last name's a certain name. But the reality is, in order to become a leader, you've got to invest in yourself, you've got to invest in your people, and you've got to invest in your industry. And if you're not doing those 3 things, you're a leader by title only. And leaders by title don't make change.
Right.
They embrace somebody else's. They adapt to someone else's, but they don't create it.
I would agree with that. And, if it's DeGraff or Namba or some of the others you have on the FCAF board, who I know, Pete Dosha. I mean, you've got some really good people, some real great minds in the industry on there. And if they lend just 2% of what they know to these boards and to these foundations, it's to go a long way. And I know they're doing that. I have ultimate respect for all those folks. And one of the things you were talking about, Jim, was how we're competing on the local level with all the other trades. What is it about them, do you think, that got them, aside from the fact that here, and here, let's pose a question, actually. The question, I'll start with Jim. Why do you think we've never made the flooring industry a licensed occupation in all markets that required some level of reasonable apprenticeship to get to the level where you could be called a floor covering installation professional, or at least a journeyman in the field?
Let me answer it this way. I believe one of the best things that could happen to our industry, and not everybody's going to agree with me on this, and that's fine, but I firmly believe this. One of the best things that could happen to our industry is if one of the large manufacturers were to come out and say, listen, whether you're licensed or not, we recognize how important quality installation is for our products. Therefore, we're going to define what certified installers mean. And once we have that definition, we are going to say that our products need to be installed by certified installers. And in fact, we're going to say that our products might not have a warranty if they're not installed by certified installers. Now, look, before everybody, has an aneurysm who's listening to this, that's in the flooring industry, let me just tell you, there's no way they could do this overnight and say it's, we're going to start this tomorrow. They would have to do this with a sundown, what I call a sundown agreement, right? They would have to, what if one of the big three were to say, hey, January 1st, 2030, 2031, 2032, we're giving you 6, 7, 8 years, because I got to tell you right now, the training organizations, they don't have the capacity to train and certify all of the installers across the nation as it is anyway. Listen, I think we've got to add a certain level of professionalism, and whether we want to go down the path of licensing, I don't know that we want to do that. But I think, you've got the pendulum swinging to the far right, to the far left. I think, licensing in every state, some people may say that's swinging the pendulum too far from where it is today. But you can argue that where it is right now, it's the Wild West, man. It's the Wild West. A guy who goes to work as a helper, he watches the guy he's working for. Let's face it, this happens every day. He watches the guy he's working for, and he works for him for a year or so, and he sees his nice truck and he sees his nice house, and he works for him a year, and he thinks he knows as much as the guy he's working for after a year, but he doesn't. And he goes out on his own and he buys his own set of tools, and he thinks he's an installer, and he hires his own set of helpers. And the problem is there's that dilution of skills. And see, that happens again and again and again, and there's a dilution of skills. And I think with that dilution of skills, the installation quality just gets poorer and poorer. And I think our consumer ultimately is the one that pays the price, and ultimately our industry will. So I think we got to correct this, and I think there's a balance somewhere in between, and I just love to see some sort of requirement for certification, and I just don't know that licensing, north to south, east to west, border to border, and coast to coast is the answer, but some sort of certification required, I think, is the answer.
Well, that's perfect, Jim. You hit right on the head. We are at the halfway point, and we're going to take about a 2-minute break so we can put some copy to the FCEF and the WFCA, talk a little bit about those organizations and give them some props. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes here on Getting Down to Business with Scott D. Perron, and we have Scott Humphrey from the WFCA and Jim Aaron from the Floor Covering Education Foundation.
traded up.
I traded up.
I traded up. I traded up.
Trade up for a career in flooring.
You won't regret it.
Hi, I'm Scott Humphrey, CEO of the World Floor Covering Association, the voice of the flooring industry. We're an association made up of manufacturers, distributors, suppliers, software companies, really anyone who makes their livelihood tied to the success of the independent flooring retailer. Our purpose statement says it all. We exist to ensure the success and profitability of professional flooring dealers and to represent the industry's common interest. And with a growing membership representing some 90% of all independent flooring retailers in North America, we are a community focused on the success, not only in the U.S., but worldwide, of the industry itself and those who make their livelihood there. My belief is that associations should focus on the challenges that are impacting the industry and their members and seek to solve them. And for that reason, we have broadened our reach at the WFCA. So come, don't only celebrate your membership with WFCA, but we challenge you, grow with us, and engage with us.
Hey, welcome everybody back to Getting Down to Business. And we've got two great guests talking about the floor covering industry today, trying to solve some problems, putting three minds together, actually 2.5, because I think I bring about half a mind to this conversation. But you guys have been awesome with this. And, you know, with what Jim had just said, I wanted to tell a quick story, which actually happened today. I was asked by my team to go out and take a look at a job that before we measured, before we had anybody come in, the woman was just completely beside herself based on what's happened with a new construction job. And I wanted you guys to weigh in this. And Scotty, I'll start with you when I get done with the little quick story here. But new construction, builder goes in, does the job. It's vinyl plank, it's tile in the bathrooms and so on. And she has nothing but problems with the house is a year old, the floor buckles, they didn't have a flood, blah, blah, blah. Well, at the end of the day, when they ripped it up, there was no prep done to the floor. They didn't do any kind of moisture mitigation product. They didn't skim coat the stress cracks or the relief cuts in the concrete. They did not put a 6 mil plastic barrier down, which is required here in the state of Florida under any vinyl plank. And I think throughout the industry, they're adopting that. And so all these things went wrong. And fortunately, she was inside the warranty program. Then I went out to take a look at the flooring, which is supposed to be a 7 millimeter thick floor. It is not 7 millimeters thick, although it says it on the box. I had to look at the box 3 times, and it was from one of the larger manufacturers. And just the whole thing is upsetting to her. So she has done her research, and she's so gun shy at this point to put anything back in the house, including vinyl, including tile, for fear that she'll have this problem again, which they're literally living on a slab of concrete that they had removed all the material. They're wearing a mask inside the house because they don't want to pick up any of the particulates. And she's just stressed out to the nines. And I see this more and more and more. And to Jim's point, Scott, when we jump back in this, it's the dilution of the skill set, even though the manufacturers have made some products that in my eyes are a whole lot less easy, or a whole lot more easy to install than they were back in when you and I started and when Jim started. You know, we had guys that were putting in linoleum, putting in inlaid flooring, pattern scribing, flash coving, all these things that, to your point, Scott, required an artisan. Now we're making easier materials and they're still not getting it right. And this is, I'm going to point the finger at the new construction guys here, because it's not just the builder I saw today. It's pretty much every track builder I see in this market, and all of them trying to loosen the price of the job by eliminating the things that need to be done. And then, of course, if something goes wrong, they're pointing at the floor covering contractor who's trying to win that bid by being the lowest possible price on the RFP.
Yeah, I don't know why we as an industry think the answer is to always go low. I mean, we think success comes simply in getting the sale. What if we provided a higher quality product and a higher quality labor? I guarantee you, if people had the option, they would pay for it. I used to tell people all the time when I was doing retail training, I would say, listen, tell them you've got an A, B, and C crew. Your A crew is highly certified. You rank them above everybody else. B is good. C, they're good, but they're new. Which one do you want? They're going to pick the B, and they're willing to pay for it because they want quality. A couple of things come to mind, Scott. First of all, back in my Shaw days, we found out that a great percentage of all claims happen because the salesperson misinformed the consumer before the sales process was over. And so they go into it with an unrealistic expectation. Secondly, I would tell you that what you just described is exactly what I was talking about, in the fact that things have changed. We've made a simpler product, but what has to happen to the subfloor is actually in some ways gotten more complicated because of that. And so if you simply learned from your uncle and that wasn't something he knew, now you're doing what you did before, but that won't work. You've got moisture barriers and things now that we didn't even think of 15 years ago. And so you've got to stay up to date on your knowledge of what is necessary to do a good install. And unfortunately, whether you're a subcontractor or not, you are the last reflection on that retailer to the consumer.
Jim,
they may not be your employee, but to that consumer, they are your employee. And so if they get treated bad or don't like the service or feel like someone was untidy when they were in the home, they don't see that as a reflection on the installer. It's a reflection on your business. And that all of those things could be fixed if we just got together and demanded it.
Jim, I can see you definitely want to add on to that.
Look, at the end of the day, it's the consumer experience, right? I mean, it's the consumer experience. I heard you say these people are living on concrete. These people are wearing masks. That's a memory that doesn't go away. That's going to stick with them for a long time. And tell me they're not going to be gun shy the next time they walk into a floor covering store. Tell me they're not going to maybe even put off buying new flooring when they can, because they're gun shy of that experience. We all lose. We all lose. Every single one of us in this scenario. The retailers, the salespeople that work at those retailers, the reps that work for the manufacturer or distributor that sell those products. Look, at the end of the day, the product is the product. I mean, it's, I write a column for one of the flooring trades. And one of the columns I wrote right after I came back from all of the trade shows at the beginning of the year was, I found it interesting. I walked through all of these trade shows and I see all of the displays, all the new products, and they're beautiful, and all the new technology and all the new styles and all the new colors. And all the manufacturers really put so much into displaying the beauty and talking about the technological advances. But all of them have one thing in common. They are useless. They are worthless. They have zero value until they're installed in a consumer's home.
That's right.
That hardwood that's sitting in a warehouse, in your warehouse, it's no more valuable than firewood until it's installed in a consumer's home and installed properly. So not only is installation incredibly valuable, it is one of the most valuable components of the entire process, and quality installation is incredibly valuable. It really sets the tone of the entire experience for the consumer. And why we don't, as an industry, pay better attention to the quality part of it and make certification a requirement is just beyond me. I mean, the more I'm into this, it just blows me away that this is not a requirement.
Hey, Jim, I'll just add to that if we got the quality customer experience down, the selling cycle would be much shorter. People would buy much more often. Part of the reason people don't buy is they don't want to go through the experience again. It's like dealing with what we consider, the concept of a used car salesman. They go in, they don't know anything. They're totally relying on the person selling to them to tell them the truth. And then when it doesn't work out the way they were told it would work out, there's no trust, not just in the installer, not in the professional there, but in anybody related to your business.
Well, and it's interesting, that whole problem, and I'm a big proponent of critical thinking, right? I teach my team all the time as the old guy to be a critical thinker, and more so with the younger generation today than ever. And not that they're not smart, they are. They use a different way to get their information. They get it through technology and so on. But being a critical thinker and come up with the solution, and as we come down the home stretch, I wanted to talk about that solution. And I know, Jim, you were telling us you have a twin track approach and how we're going to solve some of these issues. Take us quickly through those two tracks.
Yeah, real quickly, I think it'd be helpful to spend 30 seconds to talk what our mission statement is. Again, real quick, our mission statement is number one, to increase the awareness of the career pathways in flooring installation. Number two, to recruit new talent into the career pipeline as flooring installers. And number three, to connect those individuals to training opportunities. Then once we connect those people to training opportunities, provide scholarships for that training. And once they've gone through training, we assist with job placement if necessary. Well, let's talk about connecting those individuals to training. Again, I tie it in with the fact that I mentioned before, we're competing with every other trade. And if you want to become a plumber, electrician, HVAC tech, you don't have to leave your town. I don't care if you live in Dubuque, Iowa, or Jacksonville, Florida, or Orangeburg, South Carolina. You can stay right there in your own hometown and learn any of those trades. That has not been the case with flooring installation, but why not? If we're going to be on the level playing field with these guys, isn't that what we've got to do?
Sure.
What I said? We've got to go local. Recruiting has to go local and training has to go local. Well, the only way to do that, I believe, is to long-term placement where these other trades have been, trade schools, technical colleges, and community colleges. So again, if you listened to our mission statement, nowhere in it did we say we are trainers. We're not a training entity, and we don't write curriculum. So we had to work with those training partners that we have, NWFA, National Wood Flooring Association, CTEF, the Ceramic Tile Education Foundation, and CFI, as Scott mentioned. And we worked with those guys to facilitate a course curriculum that could be implemented into technical and community colleges. We piloted that program in January of 2021 in Dalton, Georgia, of all places, at Georgia Northwest Technical College. And we ran two pilots, ran it a couple of different ways. And since then, we've quite frankly exploded it. We actually have the program at 18 colleges now in 10 different states. Now, let me be very clear. Is it currently running at 18 colleges? No. Like, to give you an example, we had one college that ran it in January. They're taking a break during the fall, and they'll run it again in January, okay? When I say 18, one of the 18s, we've got a commitment from a college. We've already shipped them all the materials. They've already lined it up. They're searching for an instructor, and they're going to start it in January. That's one of the 18, okay? So we're 18 have said yes, and we're working towards it in 10 states. Look, last week I visited Catawba Valley Community College in Hickory, North Carolina, and Trident Technical College in North Charleston, South Carolina. Both of them are all over it. They can't wait to get started, and we're going to have this started in either spring or summer of next year. So listen, I would tell you our goal in the next several years is to be in all 50 states. We've got to go where the people are, right? And I think building that framework is the long-term vision, right? 10, 20 years from now, I think we just need to have an army of technical and community colleges teaching that basic floor covering installation course of study right next door to the rooms where they're teaching plumbing, electrical, HVAC, and all of those other ones. Why not? Why can't we have a seat at the table, right? But short term, if a dealer says, okay, that's great, but what can we do short term? Well, we worked with Deb DeGraff. You mentioned Deb DeGraff at DeGraff Interiors. We worked with her last year to pilot a little program, kind of a short burst, kind of a short-term thing where she went into the local high school and recruited some kids. And she actually worked to bring CFI into her town. And we held her hand and we learned a lot. And we can do that with dealers. It's all about working on local recruiting, finding a place local, bringing CFI. There's some requirements we can work through. It's a lot to go through. I don't want to take the time to do it now, but if there's a retailer listening to this that are interested in doing that, reach out to me. We'll walk you through it. We'll hold your hand. And again, we scholarship to those things as well. And Deb walked away with, well, there were 5 people that went through the class. One didn't work for Deb. She came from another store, but she walked away with 4 brand new installers out of that deal.
That's
And
fantastic.
she's done it again since then.
That's fantastic. Well, I have to tell you, I'm very encouraged by the numbers you just gave, because I know you've been working at this really hard, Jim and Scott. And the fact that you've got 18 schools on the, that just means there'll be 36, there'll be 72, and on we'll go. So you've got the groundwork laid, and somebody had to pioneer it, and they did. It's interesting, everybody I talked to, and I had a friend of mine, and we've said this amongst ourselves, you've got one of the most expensive things you purchase in your lifetime being installed by tradesmen that are not even certified, yet I have to have a license to give you a $20 haircut. It makes absolutely no sense. And until they embrace that, and I agree with you on the licensing, I think once you get to a point where the certifications are done, you don't need to necessarily add bureaucracy to it. Although I think as it starts to move forward, the government will put their hand in it. I'm sure if they see value to doing that, they'll do it. But until that happens, until those certifications are done, it becomes much more difficult. Scotty, talk a little bit about a couple of things I know are near and dear to the WFCA, and that is your new Premium Plus membership level and your SEAL leadership certification, and that's SEAL.
Yeah. SEAL stands for Seeking Excellence as Leaders. It's a certification program that is not flooring specific, much like your podcast here. You obviously you're impacted by flooring. You live in that realm, and you have a lot of audience that knows you from that. But what you talk about impacts far outside this realm. And I think leadership is a universal language, and it's a universal need. And we have a lot of people trying to call themselves leader. There are more conferences and books on leadership than anywhere in the world, and yet we've never had such a need, such a deficit as we have today. And so we created the SEAL program in conjunction with a group called Lead Every Day. You can see their podcast, leadeveryday.com. Martin Miller, who's written some 13 books, he was the leadership development trainer at Chick-fil-A for 25 years. And he and Randy Gravitt, a dear friend of mine, Randy was a pastor for years and just felt like he wanted to pour his life into leaders. And they do a phenomenal job. We have a 4-month program we have created that is self-led. So, you get in a program and you go, listen, I don't have the time to commit to it every day. That's okay. If you can't do every day, then make it up on the weekend. I mean, the segments are 5-minute video segments each day, and then applications of how you can apply that to your life. And Scott, I can't tell you the feedback we have received back. I got feedback the other day from Bruce Odette at Carpet Exchange out in Colorado. And he said, man, this is revolutionized. He said, it told me a lot of things we're already doing right, but I said, it feels good to know I'm doing them right. He said, but we've got so many new ideas we never had before. He said, this could literally change my business. That's the type of feedback we're getting from the 100+ people that have been through this program thus far. My hope is that we get to a point that people want to brag about the fact that they're SEAL certified, that they want to go around and say, I've invested. I don't want to just be a leader. I'm willing to become a leader and pour into myself. That program is not even $1 a day, Scott, and you can find out more about it at wfca.org. And so really excited about that. What was the other one you asked me about?
Your Premium Plus membership level.
Yeah, so it's a new level of membership. What we realized is because membership is free, we represent 95% of all the retailers in North America anyway. But there are some that want to be more engaged. They want to be more involved. They want the possibility of potentially going with us to DC and lobbying. And we're looking at opening that up, and the only ones that will be opened up to are Premium Plus members. They'll have the opportunity to be drawn out of a hat to go with us to DC and talk to congressmen and senators and talk to them about, here's where we need you in our business. And quite frankly, here's where we need you to stay out of our business so we can do what we know how to do. And so Premium Plus membership, again, is less than $1 a day. It's $299 for the year. And we've had some 250 people already sign up this year. By the way, if you sign up now, you get the remainder of this year and next year. It comes with discounts, including the SEAL Leadership Program. If you go through SEAL, it's 10% cheaper if you are a part of our Premium Plus membership. So there are a lot of added benefits. Again, you can find out all about that, Scott, at wfca.org.
Fantastic. And Jim, one thing I wanted you to touch on before we close today would be the opportunity that's available for those who do flooring installation. I know what I pay my teams, my good teams, and this is Florida, where the price per square foot, per square yard, per hour is less than a lot of other places in the country and more than some others. Yet these gentlemen are making 6 figures plus easily if they're any good at what they do, and teams are making way more than that. The elevator speech for an installer ready to come on board and maybe do the training. Talk about the upside. And the last thing would be, are we also going to work on helping these folks to learn how to run a business? Because one of the only other downsides I see to the installation guys, and I try to work with my kids, and I'll call them all kids because I'm the old man on set right now. But, I try to work with my kids to understand if you're making that kind of money, how to run a small P&L, how to run it like a business if you're a sub, and how to get some of the benefits of being a subcontractor. A lot of them don't understand. Yeah. So at the end of the day, they can keep more of the dollars they earned.
Yeah. So great. A couple of questions. So I remember one of the first couple of months I was in my role. I remember I was speaking to a group of kids in a high school in, of all towns, Bryan, Texas. And I was telling the kids about why they should consider flooring installation as a career path. And I was standing there in a nice suit and nice shoes. And it's almost as like I heard God speaking to me. They can tell you've never installed a floor in your life. And they're not taking you seriously. So, Jim, you don't need to be the voice to tell them. So at that point, I thought, okay, what we need to do is get actual installers to be the voice, to be the advocate. So if you go to one of our websites, we have 2 websites. If you want to know who we are and what we do, it's fcef.org. That's if you want to know about the foundation. But we created another website for potential recruits. It's flooryourfuture.com. I thought that's kind of catchy, flooryourfuture.com. And on that website, if you scroll down below the fold, as I call it, there's a video there. And that video is a 4-minute video of installers advocating for the career path. And that's the best video. That's the best advocate, because you'll see installers saying stuff like, no matter where you go, you can move anywhere in the country, coast to coast and border to border, and you're always going to have work. The highlight of the video, in my opinion, is a guy that's become a friend of mine. His name is Marquis Wright in Jacksonville, Florida. He owns Mr. Wright Flooring. And one of the things he says was, the guy that taught me how to install flooring, he made $200,000 a year legally. And I didn't know anybody that made $200,000 a year legally. And he keeps using the word legally. But, if you knew Marquis' history, you understood why he used the word legally. And it's kind of touching because now he has a very good living. And he runs several crews. He employs a lot of his cousins. And he'll tell you, I do that because I give my family jobs. It can be a very, very lucrative career. And again, you think about compared to other trades, plumbing, your work is hidden behind drywall. Electrical, it's hidden behind drywall. Flooring, people see it and it becomes a part of your memory. And look, I remember the flooring, in my home as a child. I think if we think about it, we all can, right? And it becomes a part of your memory. So I think it's really cool to be a part of that. So what was the other part of your question? I kind of got caught up in that part.
Actually you covered them both. And what I'm going to do is make sure we include the links in the podcast so that they can go and view these videos and take these seriously. And we're coming down the home stretch here. So Scotty, let me start with you. Give us a 60-second, 90-second wrap up. And Jim following, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate you guys doing this today. You are 2 of the best minds in the industry that I'm aware of, and again, that's not easy to outdo me. So, Scotty, with that, take it away. Give us a little wrap up, and we'll come to the home stretch.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you again for the opportunity. You give a great voice to us. It's always a pleasure to be on with my friend Jim, and nobody works harder than Jim and his partner in crime, Kay Whitener, and all that he does with his team. What they've accomplished is amazing. I'll give you this as a mindset. I just want to give you a visual picture. I want you to imagine that somebody walks you up to their new house and they are so excited. You've heard about it. You can't wait to see it. And you get there and they open the door and there are no floors. It's just dirt. And that's really what a house is without a floor. And yet we've done a terrible job in our industry of saying that the floor matters and the floor done right matters. And that's what Jim and his team are fighting for, is to make sure that the right people are putting it in, that they're doing it the right way, and that people have the right experience so that they come back often to buy new flooring, and to keep our retailers supplying that flooring and our manufacturers and distributors distributing and creating that flooring.
Jim?
Yeah, very good. Again, I'll echo Scott's appreciation. Thank you, Scott. This is a great forum to talk about who we are and what we do. And listen, this is an issue that's not going away. We are in a competition every day for talent. And by the way, Google, Generation Z is waking up. Generation Z is now interested in trades. Google Credit Karma. There was an article on Credit Karma, of all places. Google Credit Karma Generation Z skilled trades, and you'll find the article I'm talking about. They're looking at skilled trades very, very strongly because I think they're disillusioned with this whole 4-year career thing. The opportunity is for us, but if we're not prepared, the other trades are going to pick up these people, and we're not. This is a serious issue. We need to get behind it. I think the team that we have, again, Scott mentioned Kay Whitener, my partner in crime. She's our director of operations. We couldn't do what we do without Kay. But I think we've built a race car, as I like to tell people, but we got to have gas in the tank. We got to have support. We got to have financial funding from the entire industry. It's going to take that to move this car along. And we ask everyone for their support, financial and otherwise. So you can always reach out to me and we can talk about what we need to do to make that happen.
Well, I'll make sure that all your contact informations are together. As I said, I'm going to put my time and energy, including what we're doing today, behind it to help forward this. And I would ask that we get this out to as many people as possible once it's edited and put in the can. Scott Humphrey, the CEO of the World Floor Covering Association and Executive Chair for the FCEF, and Jim Aaron, the Executive Director of the Floor Covering Education Foundation. Thanks a lot for joining me today, guys. It was very, very inspiring, and you laid down a problem, but we've got solutions and great minds to fix it, and I look forward to working with you as we go forward.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Hey, listen, another edition of Getting Down to Business here with Scott D. Perron. Looking forward to solving your problems. If you need anything from me, it's Scott at Scott D. Perron. That's Scott at scottdperron.com. I will always answer your emails and communications. Thanks for joining me for another edition of this great show and for having these two wonderful guests on today.